What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Techtual Talk podcast. I'm your host, HD, where we talk about cybersecurity, all things tech, salary talks, you name it. We talk about everything that's in this industry that everybody wants to get into. A little bit about me. I do have 2 years in IT, with the last 6 years being in cybersecurity. And I bring in a lot of different guests on my platform. Today will be episode 41. Finally got it right, y'all. And we have Mr. JB, John Breth, aka Cyber Insight from YouTube. He's an entrepreneur. He's a veteran. He has a wealth of experience and knowledge, and we get ready to soak this in like a sponge today, guys. So appreciate everybody for rocking with me. If you're watching this on YouTube, or you're probably not watching on YouTube, who knows? Make sure you share it out, give it a like for the YouTube algorithm. For the people on Patreon, I appreciate y'all for supporting me and helping this content keep on getting better and better. But without further ado, let's bring in our guests. Hey, how's it going, man?
Hey, man, what's good?
Oh man, nothing much. Just another Monday. You know how it is on Mondays. Mostly if it's boring, that's good. So it wasn't too bad. It's kind of dragged just a little bit today. Tomorrow will be a little bit better, man. But guys, this is Mr. John. I want to say, make sure I'm saying this right. Breth.
Yep,
John Breth, aka Cyber Insight, and I don't know how many companies he runs, but he currently does is a consultant with his own company and probably other things he probably helps with, as long as with an author and a veteran and a lot of things. And he also likes to play ball. But
I do.
Without me going on a whole spiel, we'll actually let him just give a brief introduction of himself.
Sure. Hey, so my name's John Breth. I go by JB. Originally started off in the Air Force a long time ago, doing long haul telecom. Got to mess around, do some cool stuff supporting Air Force One, which kind of got me down like the network engineering path. When I got out of the Air Force, ended up going and working for a well-known consulting company. Kind of cut my chops doing network engineering and kind of developed my career that way. Eventually, I ended up transitioning over to work for a tier one ISP and kind of aligned a little bit more with the cybersecurity engineering, but still doing the network engineering. Built that into doing just overall network and cybersecurity architecture. And after, being a W-2 for, 14 years, 13 years, I kind of decided I wanted to spin off and start my own company. And I've been doing that maybe 4 years or so. So pretty much my primary day job is as a network / cybersecurity architect. And then in my downtime, I like to create a lot of content, especially for new folks getting into IT and cybersecurity, try to make the stuff somewhat interesting and relatable. And just try to help as many folks get into IT and cybersecurity, just because it's such a game changer as far as, helping people change their life. I mean, really, the opportunities that are available. I don't know if there's any other career fields out there where you can have such a dramatic change in your lifestyle and helping your family and stuff like that. So I just try to be as helpful with that as I can to as many folks as I can.
Yeah, man, I definitely agree with you on there. Don't mind me. I'm actually just trying to open up some crap in the background. If it doesn't want to open up.
No, you're good. You're good.
Let's see. But let's talk about a little bit about that. There we go. All right, there we go. Boom. Let's talk about a little bit about that future. I mean, not future. I'm sorry. That first ISP role. Let's talk about that.
Sure. So that was helping develop a cybersecurity program within that particular ISP for a certain client. I can't really go too much in depth into
just
who
keep
the
it high
client was
level
and all
as
that
you
type of
can.
stuff. Yeah. But pretty much they were developing or needed to develop some cybersecurity services that would be offered to a large collection of different clients. And so in that role, it started off kind of doing network engineering and developing what that solution would be. But as you kind of develop out a service architecture, you start to realize that it's not just you need a couple servers and a few switches and a firewall or something like that. if you're going to end up building out something that's going to have to meet certain types of regulations and controls, you're really developing a whole IT organization along with the vulnerability management, the policies and procedures, some blue team SOC type of protections and monitoring for your security service. And then also developing, the other types of customer facing things, dealing with onboarding and just your normal day-to-day operations, and making sure that everything meets the SLA requirements of having really a tier one type of service for a large collection of customers. So for me, it really was my transition point from, yeah, I have a CCNP, I have a CISP, I kind of know these things, but really taking that and being able to start developing solutions at a scale much larger than kind of just an individual organization.
Nice. And actually, was gonna ask you like, so that was the first thing you did from the Air Force, like you just pivoted into that.
No, no. So the first thing I did from the Air Force, I was working for a consulting company, and that was supporting another government client. And pretty much, I worked in their IT organization. I started off as a junior network engineer, and then ended up working my way up to being the deputy lead of a network engineering team of, I don't know, I think we had maybe like 8 or 9 people.
Okay.
And so that was kind of like that role within that organization. Of course, even if you're doing the network engineering, there's always some type of cross pollination of skills and stuff like that. So definitely was working a lot with like the SAN folks and the system folks. And then obviously everything that you're doing there is some type of InfoSec responsibility along with that. So working with the InfoSec team to make sure that, designs were meeting whatever the security controls were. And then, I don't know if you've ever done any DoD stuff, but they have a lot of different types of compliance requirements as far as STIGs, their security baseline configuration. So making sure all of that stuff was meeting whatever those requirements were, and the reporting that had to happen with those.
Nice. Yeah. No, I've always heard people say about stuff like Stigs. I was like, man, I don't, I've never had to deal with that. Like, shout out, I think Professor Blackhouse has talked about Stigs before,
Oh yeah,
and then you just
yeah.
brought it
He
up.
he he will talk about STIGs any chance he gets.
Yeah.
Have you ever messed with like the CIS bench lines?
No, I ain't mess with none of that stuff.
Oh, okay. So those are kind of like some other things, kind of along the same lines, as far as kind of just best practices for how you go about configuring different types of devices, whether or not, it's Cisco switches or Windows servers or VMs,
Hmm.
stuff like that.
Nice, man. Nice.
But from that perspective, those CIS baselines aren't necessarily correlated back to the Department of Defense. It's pretty much, more industry standard. I think it's based off of NIST type of stuff.
Okay. Would you say that because I noticed this a lot, like with people I used to my first job, like I always tell people's help desk with TSA, but I worked with a lot of people who were like retired Air Force or some in some type of faction or some type of
Sure.
military. Would you say that
Yeah.
that probably played like a huge part in the beginning of your career, as far as like just that networking piece of the military and kind of already being familiar with like DoD stuff and stuff like that of that nature?
I mean, most definitely. I mean, I think that there's a lot of different avenues that helped out with. First off, it's probably one of the only ways to be able to get a job in IT with literally no experience, right? So you join the military and they're like, okay, this is a job that you're going to have. And as long as you do well enough on what they call the ASFAB, which is kind of like a really basic SAT kind of, right? Like it's kind of looking at different types of knowledge, from math and writing, English comprehension, things like that. And if you score well enough on that, then you can kind of pick or try to pick certain types of careers that you could go into. So if you do well enough, you can pick an IT career, and they're going to give you training uh, to at least get you pointed in the right direction. And then once you get out of those training classes, which could last 6 months to a year, you're going to end up moving to your first duty station where you're going to get on the job training. So, as far as having the ability to get hands on training and then be put into a work environment where there's other people that definitely have a lot more skills than you do, and you're kind of being forced to learn all these different things, That definitely went pretty as far as kind of establishing a baseline for me. I'd also say the different benefits that it had as far as allowing me to go to school. So I did my undergrad when I was in the Air Force. It took me about 2.5 years because I was taking classes almost full time while I was working full time. And then the GI Bill that came along with that allowed me to go to grad school as soon as I got out. So there was that. There was the Air Force training. There was also vendor training that they sponsored. So we had folks come in to do like Cisco classes and stuff like that. So there was just a lot of different kind of like building blocks that were definitely essential for me being able to get in the right position for once I transitioned out of the Air Force, being like, hey, I already have a degree, I already have multiple certs. I had my Network Plus, Security Plus, CCNA, and had taken my first CCNP test by the time I got out after 4 years. Uh, Coupled with the 4 years of active duty experience, it was like I was already hitting the ground running as far as getting out into the real world and getting a tech job out there.
Right. I kind of want to laugh at you saying hit the ground running because you always see
Yeah.
that term like on job descriptions, like you want somebody who can hit the ground running, and you're like, okay, I mean, I guess. And sometimes that's like with like an entry level role or something like that. I know. I've seen like
Sure.
a lot of different type of job descriptions, and I kind of put red flags on things I don't think make sense to me anymore. It's like, oh no, you want a
I mean,
team for one person,
hitting the ground. Yeah, hitting the ground running on an entry level role definitely would be a red flag. You definitely would not want that. But being prepared to actually work in like a professional environment with like the background of having to support mission critical things in the military, um, I think definitely kind of puts you in a different a different mindset as far as kind of responsibility and I don't know. There's just I think I don't know that there's other places where you're going to have to like be familiar with having a lot of weight already put on you as far as responsibility goes, while being kind of a younger junior person.
right?
So having that in the military, it makes it a little bit easier as far as understanding, you know, the simple things that some people, just might not have had experience with as far as like, yeah, you need to be on time for things. You need to be there, not only on time, you got to be there early,
Right,
right? Documentation is a huge thing that you need to make sure. You need to be able to articulate and
right.
communicate in a way that is, able to be received by your audience, things like that. That if you just go to college, you don't necessarily, run into having that experience
Yeah,
yet. Um, yeah.
I would agree. And for those that are watching right now, John just listed like probably some of like the most, if not the most important soft skills that you can have while you're working,
Mm.
and especially with I think one of the I think the second role or whatever, where you have to probably interface with like more different
Mhm.
business units, or when you're trying to stand up
Yep.
the operation stuff like that. I'm pretty sure that came in handy just because of
Most definitely.
you try to get stuff done, but if you don't talk to people the right way, then they might say I'm not going to do it or whatever. Or so as small as being nice may seem, it's big when you're working. You may be mean to the wrong person who's in charge of signing off. Hey, do you get that
Yep.
bonus next quarter or next year?
Yeah. I mean, so everybody has different things that like motivate them or make them, and motivate could be in a positive way or like in a negative way. So trying to be I don't know, kind, empathetic, having a little bit of grace, but being proactive and showing respect and being like on top of your stuff makes working with other people like a lot easier. So if you kind of approach things from that perspective, even if you don't necessarily have like the top level of skills or anything like that, if you come in with that type of attitude, more people are going to want to work with you than not. And
Definitely.
pretty much as long as you can get people all kind of like pulling in the same direction, and so everybody's on the same page, and people are just going to be much more willing to either put up with stuff or help you overcome things, or you might not necessarily know the answer, have the resource to do something, but somebody else in that organization might. And if you just have a positive relationship with them, or you just have a positive reputation, then people are going to be a lot more willing to help you out with that than if they're like, oh man, that dude's an asshole. Like he doesn't, he's just
Yeah.
mean, he's lazy, he doesn't follow through on the things that he says he's going to do. He always tries to take shortcuts, and then everybody else has to clean up after him, stuff like that. um, I don't know. That just makes stuff really, really difficult. And then also in tech, like it is a small community. So if you get a bad reputation, it's not very hard to find out from other people. Like, yeah, you know, that guy wasn't that great when he was here. He didn't really, chip in as much as everybody else, or he, was just kind of overly selfish
Right.
in some ways that, wasn't as helpful as he could be compared to everybody else that's trying to get stuff done. So
Man.
just try to be mindful of that. Nobody's perfect, nobody's happy all the time, like we all go through stuff. But I think even if it's not like internally focused, as long as you can be somewhat empathetic, have some empathy towards other people, and have a little bit of grace for the stuff that they're going through, um, I think that normally, is a good way to foster relationships in an organization.
Most definitely. And not only that, it's we had access to Twitter, we have access to LinkedIn now. You never know who is who, just looking at stuff you comment or looking at who you
Sure.
work with, and they can go back in you up for a job and say, okay, let's go ask the people he
Yep.
worked with about him or his manager. You know,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
very easy. I don't, and we're gonna get into social media a little bit because we see a lot of crazy things on there.
For
We
sure.
may even
Yeah.
segue that into like funny stuff we might have seen like on YouTube. But I just think it would behoove like all the people who are just starting out to listen to those of us. And I'm only pretty much like close to 10 in, and I'm not
Yeah.
like, I know people that's 20, 30, 40 years. So even
Sure.
time they have something to tell me, I listen to it because
Yeah.
longevity is hard. I mean, you just do
Sure.
it, day by day, month by month, but I mean, you got to
Yep.
know how to survive in this thing. And in the industry where standards change, technology change,
Yep.
something that was in demand today may not be in demand
Yep.
tomorrow.
Sure.
So you need to be open minded and listen, and not burn any bridges. Because even though
Right.
I've gotten roles before that I didn't have to interview hard with just because somebody used to work at a company with
Mhm.
my other manager, and my other manager talked good
Yeah.
about me. So that's like, oh, well, I was cool with her. I already know who this person is because we heard about her at the last company. Just bring them on.
Right.
And the longer you
Yeah.
start working,
Networking is.
oh, I'll say, go ahead, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say networking is a huge part of success and longevity in your career. Um, Nobody's gonna be able to be successful without other people helping them in some ways. I mean, you have to put in the work yourself, but when you do that and you do it in a positive way, then normally, other people want to work with you, right?
Hmm.
Like nobody wants to work with people who like aren't good at what they do, or uh, don't have certain levels of skills, which means that everybody else kind of has to like pull all the weight all the time.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I don't know. With that, and then coupled with you kind of said something which is a good point too, is like listening to folks who've been around longer. That doesn't necessarily mean like whatever they're telling you is 100% correct and applicable to you,
Hmm.
but there definitely is slices of wisdom in there. So you at least want to, I don't know, from my perspective, you probably would want to listen a little bit more to somebody like that than folks who are just like brand new, like, hey, I got my first job in cyber,
Hmm.
and then they're the SME on how to get into the industry and have a long successful career. And it's like you've been here for like 2 years. I mean, it's great that you're here, and you wish folks as much success and you
What?
hope that they have a long career. But yeah, I mean, there's only you only know what you know, and it's better when you know what you don't know, because then at least you can kind of navigate things a little bit better. But if you don't know what you don't know, then you're just gonna, I don't know, sound foolish and
Mm-hmm. Or,
probably be giving off a lot of bad advice and information.
yeah, or come off as a gatekeeper, because you want people
Sure,
to
exactly.
actually do the work, but you're gatekeeping because you tell them to do the work first. Trust me, we're going to get into that. We're definitely going to get into that. So one thing I wanted to ask you, I've been thinking about the whole time, is like, I think you're one of the few guests I've had that's
Mm,
did networking and cyber, and I know it's a lot of
sure.
correlation in that Venn diagram. And
Mhm. Sure.
honestly, when I really think about it, besides probably networking, probably dealing with a little bit more numbers,
Yeah.
what's in your mind, since you did both, what's the biggest difference between the two functions?
Um, that's actually a really good question. Um, I mean, so when people are wanting to get into cyber, I always, and this is probably like a bias on my part, I always tell them that they need strong networking fundamentals. Um, just because if you don't have a good grasp of how that works, like I'm not saying you need to like know how to configure BGP, but if you don't really understand layer two and layer three communication and ports and protocols and how data communication happens and data flows, depending upon the role that you have in cybersecurity, your learning curve is going to be really, really steep.
Hmm.
I mean, you can definitely still get in and be successful, but you're going to be going back and there's going to be a lot of I don't know, a lot of question marks that you're trying to figure things out. So I always try to steer people to be like, yeah, you want to make sure that you understand, these kind of basic fundamentals of that before getting into it. Um, I would say there's also a lot of other overlap, not intentionally, but as a network engineer, a lot of times people blame the network for everything. And so, in order to prove that the network is not actually the problem, you normally have to learn quite a bit about systems and applications and things like that just to be able to do troubleshooting to be like, look, like the traffic is going back and forth. I even went in and had to dig into like the logs on this server to
Right.
show like, yeah, you actually have all this other stuff going on and you might want to look at that. So in kind of getting a little bit more experience in looking at applications and servers. Um, I think that that kind of overlays a bit with cybersecurity because as a cybersecurity person, it's not like you're just protecting the network portion of things. That's a part of it, but you're also having to look at AppSec. You're also having to look at systems, operating systems, servers, things like that. So I think that there's definitely some areas where the knowledge overlaps. Uh, I don't know. I think it kind of marries itself well, but then obviously you have your specialties in both
Right.
careers that are completely divergent from kind of that center area of the Venn diagram, right? So like somebody who's doing red teaming and specifically dealing with like maybe web app pen testing. Uh, they have some knowledge of networking and stuff like that, but really they're much more focused on back end stuff and database stuff. Uh, and vice versa, if you have somebody who's like maybe they're a specialize in like data center or SAN network infrastructure, like yes, they know some things about systems and things like that, but they aren't necessarily, really getting too far outside of their area of expertise of that particular type of networking.
Yeah, man, I definitely agree. I thought you was gonna say one does subnetting, the other one doesn't.
No, I mean, I think everybody should know how to do subnetting, but that's just me.
I should have told you to
It,
put the
it makes
graphic out
things
that you
quicker.
made.
Oh man, I got a lot of those. Got a lot of infographics for the subnetting. Yeah, that just makes things quicker. I mean, obviously there's calculators and all that type of stuff, um, but it just
Yeah.
depends. But it's good. It's good knowledge to have.
And the funny thing is, I've told people this plenty of times that I felt that Network Plus was harder than Security Plus.
Sure. I mean, especially depending upon like at what point which one you took first.
I took Security Plus
I think
first, but then went
that
back was going through the Network Plus. So
yeah,
I was honestly this harder to me than
I,
security is.
I think the Security Plus, there's kind of a lot of information that if you're in IT and you use IT systems, it's stuff that you might have seen or are familiar with, right? Where the Network Plus just has stuff that, like, if you've never done networking, um, like who cares about where the demarcation point is for circuits coming into a building? Like nobody knows that. Nobody knows, like the different cabling standards for copper cables and stuff like that, unless you've actually had to build them, right, and make them. So, but yeah, there's definitely things that would be kind of foreign to folks who, if they haven't had to do that, um, it's just something completely brand new, and it would make it, more information that you need to learn when you're going through that process.
So speaking of that question, this got me remind me of like stuff that Diera says on Twitter.
Yeah, I got time, cuz.
What do you think about Network Plus and CCNA? God, I can't remember, but I think she said like, it is beneficial if somebody would if they would have a Network Plus and then do CCNA. I think she said that. I don't want to misquote
Sure.
her. And I think people
No, I
started
bet I bet
Geico.
she did.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no. They said like, oh, what are you paid by CompTIA? Are you so like every time she brings that up, I do like a hashtag CompTIA cabal. Like it's just a group of us that are like, trying to push people towards the Net Plus. No, I think there's definite benefit in there. So like way back in the day when I like was taking mine, so like 2005, 2006, the CCNA actually was broken up into two different tests. They kind of had like a networking intro book, and then they had an interconnecting Cisco network devices book. And you could either take the CCNA as one overall test, or you could do the intro test, and then you could do the second test. And that intro test pretty much was all of the stuff that you would find in the Network Plus. So I think that depending upon like what a person wants to do and what their goals are, the Network Plus definitely is a great place to start off. Um, Also, depending upon what career field you're in. So if you are in the DoD or something like that, you have the 8570 requirements for different types of certifications to even be able to get on a contract. um, Net Plus or Security Plus actually will be one of those certs that will let you get one of those lower lower level jobs or entry level jobs, where like the CCNA is just a harder exam. It just is. Like you're gonna have to learn stuff about different types of routing protocols and how to configure them, and access control lists and different things that if you're not actually going to be configuring Cisco devices, it really probably isn't applicable to the type of knowledge that you want to be focusing on. I should caveat that with uh, as long as you aren't going to be configuring network devices, because there is carryover between that and other vendors. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. I wouldn't call the CCNA like an entry level network cert, because it's not. It's actually a pretty challenging cert. It's also something where if you get it, you should be able to get a job and it should pay relatively well compared to the Net Plus. I don't know that folks are, besides like kind of that
Right.
DoD situation. I don't think people are just like hiring people because they have a Net Plus.
Right.
But that also leads into like another like topic as far as, do you really need to get the cert or not? And a lot of times the language that I like to use with it is you should be making sure that you understand and get the knowledge for the learning objectives from that cert. Whether or not you take the exam or not, if it's beneficial to you and it's beneficial to your career and it is going to help you get past like, some HR screening and stuff like that, then do it. If it's something that's not, you should probably still try and get the knowledge that is covered by it. So
Yeah, man. I definitely agree with that because I tell many people like in my ebook I was saying like you don't have to take Network Plus, but at least if you know the information in there, combined with a Sec
yep,
Plus and like an entry level cloud cert, you should be
sure,
good enough for some entry level role. Um,
yep,
and I also reminds you like how many clients I've had or talked to people that either are trying to break into cybersecurity and they're like, oh, I'm studying for my CCNA now, which I always say cool, but in my mind, I'm always like, okay, what do you actually plan on doing with the CCNA, or are you trying to get it just
Exactly.
because you think it's going to get you hired? Which, in cases,
Right.
can, but I know it take a lot of time to study it. Like I'm just not a fan for getting certs to sit on, just say I have them. I want to use the knowledge I
Right.
learned and get it. It's one of the reasons
Yep.
why I tell people don't get anything past Sec Plus because I'm like, hey, if you want to go blue team route or whatever, cool. Get CYSA
Right.
Plus like once you get a job
Yep.
because it's gonna make what you do at work even better, opposed to just getting it
Sure.
and nobody's really caring when you're interviewing and not asking you about it. And yeah, we definitely can touch on those things. But I'm glad you gave us
Yeah.
that whole spiel about networking and the CCNA. And so now what I'll get into is a little bit about like currently, what you do now. I think you said like after 4 years you decided, or you've been doing this latest venture for 4 years.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
what spun that? And then we'll also get kind of like, the gist of what do you do? Like, are you like the
Sure.
overseer or do you have employees or, pretty much
Right.
everything?
Right. Right.
Just tell us as
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
as you can.
So the original impetus for like wanting to start my own company. So I had when I was working for the consulting company I was working for, we always had to do a lot of extra like business development stuff in addition to like the 40 hours of work that we were doing for our client. And yeah, we worked on a proposal for almost a year. And it was, I remember how, I mean, it was a lot. It was like a $700 million proposal. And I'm like, man, I'm busting my butt on this, trying to help out with this. And I'm going to get absolutely nothing for this. Like, I don't get paid for the extra
Okay.
hours. Um,
All right.
this is going to be great for the overall company, right? Like, yeah, they're going to get this contract. Other people are going to get bonuses off of this. It's all great for the people that are really, really high up. And I just kind of had this epiphany like, I have no problem working hard and working long hours, but I'm like, I'm never going to do that ever again for someone other than myself. Like, if it's not for me, uh, having my own company and putting in hours like that, I have no interest in doing that over a continued period of time. But that doesn't mean like as a W-2 working for a company, you don't have times where you have to do a lot of work. Like depending upon, what's going on in the projects that you have. Yeah, there's times where you're going to have to work 50 or 60 hours in a week just because there's a deadline. But there's a difference between that being kind of like a finite thing and it's understood versus just constantly being asked to do extra stuff and not being compensated for it.
Right.
So that planted the seed in my mind. I didn't start my company at that point. I actually left that company and ended up going to the tier one ISP, started doing like the cybersecurity engineering and stuff like that. And that was great. Love that. That was a pretty great experience from seeing a program start off with like 5 people and it grew to almost 100. So that was great. And in that role, I kind of developed and transitioned from a senior engineer into an architect. And along with that, after doing that for maybe like 5 years or so, or actually a little bit before 5 years, I kind of mentioned to them like, hey, I'm kind of thinking of starting my own company. Um, and they were like, okay, that's cool and all that, but you're gonna have to go through HR and make sure there's no like conflicts of interest and stuff like that. Um, which is kind of like a really good side conversation as far as people and starting companies or working multiple contracts or having multiple W-2s and conflicts of interest. And uh, my only word of advice on that is make sure that you are not putting yourself in a situation where you're going to get in trouble by working multiple jobs when you've signed a contract saying that you won't do that, because you have the possibility of them coming after you in some ways or being fired and stuff like that. And I don't know. A lot of people put stuff out on the timeline about that type of stuff, and
Right.
I'm always like, ooh, as a W-2, that can get really dicey. As a business owner, it's a lot easier to get contracts and get away with being able to have multiple contracts that you're working on. But as a W-2, a lot of these companies have non-compete clauses and the stuff that people are signing. And yeah, I don't know how much of that is people actually do run that through their HR and it's cool, or people just don't
They just
care.
don't care.
But then they're giving bad advice out to people because it's easy when you're already kind of established and you have stuff lined up. But then if somebody listens to your advice and maybe they're just getting into tech and they aren't established and they don't have the experience to be able to fall back on something if they get released from their job, because they hop into tech and they're like, hey, I should be able to juggle 3 jobs at once. I'm gonna make 300K like that. You're just like,
Yeah.
be careful out there, because that's the thing, is I don't want to see folks listen to some stuff and not really understand the process that they should be going through just to make sure everything's cool. And hopefully it is cool, and then you can make some really good money
Right.
from that. But sorry, that was a
No,
little, that was
you're
like my
good because I
soapbox
mean I've
thing.
just done it before too. It's because it's kind of and then if I go from the employee uh perspective of it, they was like, well, y'all pick up all these multiple contracts and we don't get money for it, so why can't I pick up an extra job?
Right,
So I can see both
right, yeah,
sides,
yeah. Oh, for
and I
sure.
definitely agree with it. It's like, hey, inflation. I'm trying to do all this and that
Yep,
before whatever happens.
sure.
I got a skill set that's not easily found. Why not?
Yep,
It's not interrupting with what I'm doing for you guys. I'm not telling any company
yep,
secrets or nothing.
right, yeah,
So I know
yeah,
why they do that, but at the same time, it's one or two things. Okay, if you don't want me to, then
yep,
pay me what the second job will pay me, and I won't work nowhere. We'll just
right.
do that, and not too many are going to do that.
Yep, sure. Yeah, yeah. You just got to be smart about it, and be wise, and make sure that you know what the rules are. And if you are going to break the rules, this is not legal advice, by the way. If you are going to break the rules, don't tell people on Twitter. Like, I don't, I don't know. Uh, but so, kind of going back to uh, that point, as far as like, yeah, I asked, hey, I want to start my own company. They're like, cool, but you can only do like this tiny portion of work that doesn't there's no conflict of interest between our large Fortune 500 company and your single member LLC. And I'm like, that's cool. I can cut my teeth and kind of like learn some business processes and get stuff spun up. And then eventually I ended up deciding to go full time, and got some full time contracts. And what I do is pretty much I'm a cybersecurity architect, just designing systems, leading engineering teams, uh, both from like a design and build out perspective, and then like I guess you would call it like tier 4 support in the event of stuff really, really breaking and needing help uh, for systems after I've designed them and built them out. If something really hits the fan, then I'll come back in and help with whatever those issues are.
Nice. And so this is probably for everybody who wants to know about that. Like how does somebody go about that transition? Like how do they get bid on contracts and stuff? I remember you gave us some info on Twitter about
Sure.
when it comes to like taxes and how to set this up and that. Do they just
Yeah, yeah.
set the company up and they go? It's like a certain site you say, hey, I know how to do this, and you just bid on a contract for
I,
your price, or like how does that go?
yeah, I mean, so there's a few different ways that you can go about doing that. I would say, as somebody starting off, um, with a small company, meaning just yourself, networking is going to be the best way for you to end up finding a contract somewhere. So if you've had a decent career, you have good relationships with people. It kind of goes back to what we were saying before. Like, if people like you and they know that you do good work, then there's a greater chance of, once you be like, hey, I'm starting my own company, people know what it is that you're good at. And if they want to work with you again, then they're going to be willing to consider uh, giving your company a contract to do stuff.
Okay.
So I would say that, like, that's probably the best or easiest way to go about it, um, because that's a little bit more known. You can definitely go and try and bid on contracts. Um, that's a little bit going to be a little bit dicier, just because you have to kind of learn how that whole
Right.
process is.
And I think
So
that's what a little bit I was hitting at, like both parts. Like, um, for example, like if you like the company that you're just doing like the small bit of work for at first, like part time, like Was it actually
Yeah.
cheaper for them to hire you like that instead of you being like an employee of theirs?
I mean, so it really depends, but normally in a lot of cases it can be, right? So uh, if it's something, so for instance, like what I was doing was just like vulnerability assessments, right? Well, obviously at that point, it's easier to have somebody come in and do some Nessus scans and put together some reports. Notice that I didn't say pen test and I didn't say red team because that was not what I was doing. But vulnerability assessments. Um, then yeah, that's cheaper for them to pay for somebody to come in for a few hours to do something like that and then write up a report than them hiring somebody to be doing you know uh, a Nessus person full time. I mean, obviously organizations do need that,
Hmm.
but if you're talking about small to medium sized businesses, that might not be something that they're necessarily mature enough to be able to handle. You know, if they only have one person who does IT, they aren't necessarily going to go out and hire one other person to do Nessus scans for them, right? So uh, I think trying to find what that niche is, and then finding um, what the customer base is that the services that you have would align with is definitely the way to go. And then also figuring out, okay, well, what type of services do you want to offer? Are you trying to do more short term type of stuff? Are you trying to be like full time employees, right? So uh, are you trying to be like, hey, you know that this organization needs certain skill sets, they don't have those skill sets within, but it's going to be people that would be doing 40 hours a week for them, right? So maybe they don't have the expertise um, to have a SOC. Maybe they need to build out a
And they
SOC,
need, yeah.
and so they're going to contract that out because they aren't an IT company. They don't know how to go about doing those things or even the right questions to ask. So it might be easier for them to go find a company that will offer SOC services to them, right? So
Okay.
it's just kind of going through that to see how that aligns with the skill sets that you have as a business and the skill sets that you want to develop and offer as a business.
Cool. Yeah, no, because I mean, you know, and I probably only seen this probably work for like some seldom people, but a lot of times people are either trying to get into cyber, and so it's like, well, technically you can freelance, so you might not be an expert, but who knows who
Sure.
may hire you. But technically you get some type of paid experience, or somebody hires you. And then
Yeah.
like you said, if you want to transition into that, you're a good worker. You want to just do your own thing. You can do the same
Yeah.
thing, especially.
I mean, so there definitely is like the ability to freelance and 1099, as a 1099 contractor for organization. My only thing with that is I think that that's only going to really work out for folks as much if they already have like the resume and
Hmm.
experience to be able to justify that. Um, I think it's a little bit harder in some instances if it's a good organization that you would actually want to work with. You definitely can find other places where yeah, people will give you a 1099 contract, but it's going to be a shitty place and the rates are going to suck, right? So that might not be the best environment for somebody to hop into, but uh, everybody has different reasons and a different path to get where they need to go. So that might be worth doing that for 6 months or whatever on a short term 1099 contract to end up building up some resume experience, and then you also have some contracting experience, and then hopefully you can move on to something better.
Yeah, man. That's dope, man. Thanks for the insight on that. Hopefully, maybe somebody was
Yeah.
contemplating on trying to do that right now, and they just watched
Yep.
this and they're like, oh, okay, great. Oh, so that's how I do that. So maybe I could just try to do this way, and then little by little, like you said, you get enough
Yeah.
good traction. Just go off on your own, and then now off your own, you actually get the benefits. Of actually being an actual business as well. You're probably
Yeah.
expensing everything you do.
100%. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, so for me, when I started my LLC, I didn't actually get a full time contract for a little bit over 2 years. But I wasn't trying to push for that either. I was like, I want to make sure that I get like my accounting in order and I get, business checking accounts, business credit card, get all my paperwork lined up, get my stuff lined up so that I can bid on government contracts, get, uh, you know, uh, somebody to be a CPA, get somebody to be a lawyer, get like when you don't have like a rush, then you're kind of able to do
Mm-hmm.
things a little bit more methodically and have not necessarily a checklist, but kind of like, yeah, I know that I need to do these
That's me
things.
right now.
And you feel a little bit more comfortable when it's time to like go and make that next step towards actually going full time versus like, hey, I had this idea, I'm going to spin up a company tomorrow. And
Mm, yeah.
you don't have, I would say one of the other things is like, you want to, I guess kind of like going back to what you're talking about, like listening to like the old heads and stuff like that. Same thing applies to starting a business and listening to other people who have had a business, right? There's a lot of knowledge there, and thankfully, I have some friends who have done that and shared a lot of information with me that kind of helped me avoid a lot of early pitfalls and let me know like the stuff that I needed to do to get into a place to be successful. Which is also one of the other reasons why I'm perfectly happy to talk about this type of stuff because if other people have done it for me, then I like being able to share a little bit of my experience, and hopefully that can at least help some people avoid doing something that might screw them up starting off from jump. So
Okay. That's dope, man. That's dope. Let's give you a round of applause for that. But now let's have some fun. Let's have some fun.
sure.
Oh man. Um, this is gonna be called. Maybe I'm gonna start this on like from now on. It's gonna be called the
Stop the cap.
segment. All right. So we see so much on that the funny thing, now they're gonna start calling it Elon Musk's Twitter. We see a
Sure.
lot of funny
Yeah,
stuff on there, man. I don't know. I think one of the reasons, like I said, I stepped away from really being on there is because I just started seeing a whole bunch of stupid stuff on my timeline
sure.
regarding people
Yeah.
that don't even have the experience trying to tell people things, and I was like, that's not true. And
Yeah.
for me, it's never really, most of the time it's not out of just trying to argue with you. It's just trying to like have you be accountable for what you're saying, because this has
Hmm.
turned into like, I'm trying to see, like, I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot of parallels of people telling people to get in the tech as if they're trying to be in the MLM. Like MLM, you make a lot of
Sure.
lofty
Yeah.
promises. Now people are making people promises within like 3 months or whatever, and
Yeah.
it's not that easy
Yeah.
unless you have some type of relationships with some of these organizations or something like that. It's just not that easy. And I'm just a person like, hey, okay, you say you can do this, well, prove it. I always go back to
Yeah.
the woman that was talking about the scrum thing, and it passed over my, what was it? What did it pass up on? I think it showed up on my TL sometime last week. Let me see if I can find like a picture or something.
What was she talking about? That if you get Scrum certified, you're gonna make
Oh, you could be Scrum certified in
200K
like
or something.
what is it, like 3 months or something like that? Let me see where it's at. This,
Okay.
I'm looking on my work phone because I think I had it on here. Let's see. Dang, it's not on here. It must be on my personal. But yeah, her and I remember like they saw the whole Twitter space about that one day because I was just like, well, I went to your site. I don't see any testimonials. I don't see any reviews. I don't know the price. Like how, because some people, people that are new are kind of might be scared to ask that or whatever. But at the end of the day, hey, people, it's your
Sure.
money. Don't even be afraid
Yeah.
to ask me about, hey, where are my reviews? One time I had I have to stop saying girl. I had a woman. She said, hey, what's your success rate? And I like that question. I didn't get mad at it. And I told her, hey, most of the people that
Yeah.
I help at least do XYZ. They said it's a very
Hmm.
straightforward question. Some people want to get mad at it, but I'm like, hey, you're playing with
Yeah.
people's money here. And
Yeah.
no, I mean, most people that's in the industry know like you can't be, getting the scrum that fast. Now, unless you're like a very good liar and you're just a superb interviewer and you're really good at learning on the job, go for it. But that don't work for
Sure.
everybody. And from
Well,
yourself.
and it also depends on like what other skill sets you're coming with, right? I mean, that's the other thing too. Like, yeah, if you already had project management experience, but just not in tech, right? And then you transition into something like that, then yeah, that's obviously you're going to be able to fast track that. That's like me taking, these entry level cloud
Mm-hmm.
certs and being like, yeah, I passed it in a week. Well, of course I passed it in a week. I have, 18 years of IT experience,
Right.
so I understand the fundamentals of IT. At that point, it's just learning different terminology. Um, but I don't, I'm not turning around and being like, hey, I can make sure that you, random person who's never done anything in tech, I can make sure you can pass this in a
Right.
week. And if you pay me $500, I'll make sure you're good to go, right? Like I don't know.
Yeah. And then
It's crazy in a lot of ways. A lot of I don't know, ideas, unrealistic ideas of things. I mean, anybody who's been in tech for a long period of time, and maybe not even a long period of time, but like more than 5 years,
mm-hmm.
right, knows the amount of work that it goes to not only getting in, but then also maintaining, right?
Right.
Because stuff changes constantly. It's not like you get in, you get six figures, and then you're just good the rest of your life. Like
Yeah.
stuff is always changing. There's always going to be other people who are learning about things that you don't know about. Um, so you kind of just got to stay, on top of
Right.
things if you want to be successful over the long run.
And
And if you have the personality for that, and you like learning things, and you're kind of inquisitive and stuff like that, then that perfectly aligns. And that's not necessarily like too hard of a challenge. You still got to do the work, but it's not like overwhelming. But yeah, I don't know. It's funny the stuff that comes across the timeline.
right. And then I was going to touch
Um,
what you said. You said maintain, not only maintain, but go past maintain to, excel. It's like
right.
I know people that's
Yeah,
been
exactly.
maintaining the same type of jobs for a while, but they can't excel because they
Yeah,
didn't put in the work. Like it's only a handful of us is going to tell you,
yeah,
like, okay, like even for me, like right now, technically I have to do hybrid in the office 3 days a week. And on certain days,
yeah,
I have to muster if I'm either going whether I'm working on this or it's something I want to study on my own. That time I take away
sure.
from family or going to sleep to put in the work to stay ahead of the game. And a lot of
Right.
people
Yeah,
aren't, really thinking about that when they're talking about getting into tech. They're just, like I said, just sitting like it's super easy. I'm like, certain roles it is, and well, I don't want to get into non-tech technical, but because even in non-tech things, they have things they need to
sure.
learn, new softwares that are coming in that the
Yeah.
non-technical people need to be aware of,
Yes,
or different policies and frameworks that are coming out they need to read up on. So it's really all
sir.
the same thing. You have to be dedicated to learning. And no, I think I made a video because we always see this conversation about do you have to love tech or whatever. Do you have to love it? No,
Mm,
but it be in your best interest to be, I don't even say passionate. I say it in your best interest to actually be interested in it and not just
sure.
trying to do it because it's going to get you paid money. Because eventually, after you made whatever money you tried to make, what keeps you going? And if you didn't
Right.
get some
Yeah.
good deal at some type of startup where you got like all this equity, what are you going to do for
Right.
all those years? So it's hard to keep on doing something you don't
Right.
like.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting conversation when that happens, like the whole passion in tech thing, and then that becomes gatekeeping. Um, which I agree. Like, yeah, you don't need passion to be in, but if you have passion about it, and like you said, or interest and continued interest, you're going to be a lot more successful, and you're going to have a lot better working relationships with people because people are going to want to work with you if like your shit, right? And I just find it hard to think that somebody is really going to be as skilled if they aren't putting in the extra work that it takes to stay up on things. Um, Now, hopefully, the best case scenario is in your job and the way that it is, that environment actually allows you to learn within that role, right? So if they're constantly deploying new things and they're constantly sending you to
Hmm.
training and you're doing all that type of stuff, that kind of makes it a little bit easier as far as you don't necessarily need to do that outside of the office.